Good morning, everyone. My name is Erika Susana Briones, and you can just call me Erika. And I am your sexual confidence coach today. And today I'm going to bring my special guest, Yana Seidl. And she is a spiral practitioner, and she does pelvic bowl activations. She's also a dancer, and she's in the UK, I believe. Yeah. And today we're going to talk about her story, and we're going to just kind of have a casual conversation. Welcome, Yana.
Thank you. Hello.
And I want people to kind of learn your background, like how did you get into the spiral, but before the spiral, just some awesome facts about you.
Awesome facts about me. Ooh.
Top three.
Top three. I love what I do. I don't know if that's an awesome fact, but it feels amazing to just like ooze and live and breathe what I do and enjoy every moment of it. So when it comes to my work, I'd say that's a number one top fact. Number two, right after going through the spiral, after a lifetime of being afraid seeing dancing, I got my first space as a cast member. So I got my first role as a dancer performing on a stage in South Africa, and only a year later I returned to choreograph my own show for the very same stage. So that feels like a big testament to what the spiral and what this work has given to me personally. And the third interesting fact, I guess, is that I am between South Africa and the UK a lot. My partner's in South Africa. He also facilitates this work. So I'm in a relationship which is very, very, very full of emotional clearing and processing and calling each other in and being involved in this together. I think those are my top three.
Yes. And I definitely hear a lot of passion, and you're just like really passionate about the spiral and this work. We all hear about do the work, right? And everyone has their versions of work. It could be childhood work. It could be, meditation or gratitude. And for the people that don't know the spiral, could you kind of like share more about what the spiral is? Because before I kind of like asked you the question, the way Yana and I met was I was supposed to interview her. Like my original intention was to interview her and Yaniso, and I couldn't even pronounce his name. and it went from interview in January to we were going to do like this trade. And at first I was like, okay, I have no idea what this is going to look like. And I went through the spiral, and it's amazing. It really is. And I've done it twice, one with Yana and then the second one with my friend Ryan. And now Yana is going to tell us about the infamous, no, just kidding, the famous spiral.
So the spiral, shout outs to Dane Thomas, who is the creator of it all. He pieced it all together. I've been revamping my website and writing all about it, so I should be clearer on where to begin with this conversation, which gets asked to me all the time. It's a huge process that calls upon various maps. There's 3 maps which inform it. The 7 chakras, the spiral dynamics, which is a map of the evolutionary process of humans, and the scale of consciousness, which talks about how different emotions resonate at different frequencies. So there's lower resonance and higher resonance emotions that affect and correlate to our level of consciousness. And all of these maps kind of parallel and feed into the various levels of the spiral. At each level of the spiral, there's 3 emotions which most heavily impact our ability to be activated at that level and engage with life at that level. And what we do is, through emotional clearing, we neutralize the charge around the 3 emotions so that we can really release the energy at each of the levels and come into our power and come into our presence and come closer in line with our kind of truest selves or higher selves or divine selves. It's somewhat of a full body activation. We unlock the unlock from the root up to the crown, and then there's a big process of integrating it back down again.
Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting that you talked about like activation, because when Yana was doing this spiral with me, like her body just moves, like it just like I was like, whoa, is she having an orgasm? I was like, she's excited. But it definitely is a form of muscle testing, and I tend to also use that as my morning routine, and it really clears. I think even Dane talks about clearing your shit, right? Because we all have emotional baggage that weighs us down. And you talked about like emotions, and so my audience, we focus on sexuality. So what are the core like emotions that kind of like hold people back? I mean, besides shame and guilt, self-worth. I mean, what's your experience that you've seen, especially for the men?
I think it really depends on what level we're talking about. So there's different levels of engagement with self. Shame, guilt, and dogma are the root levels. So they're to do with our deserving, and they're most closely related to our sexual and sensual areas. But as we travel through the spiral and the different layers of life, you know, the throat's very linked to the vagina, the throat's very linked to the root. And so a lot of expression stuff, you know, emotions around expression, which can be low self-esteem and confidence and anxiety, can really play out in our ability to be sexually present. I think it's really to do with the conditioning and what we've anchored personally, which can be so influenced by so many different areas of life. And it's really interesting. The more I step into my work, the more I understand that money stuff isn't really to do with money, and sex stuff isn't really to do with sex. It's to do with like our mothers and our fathers and our childhood.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's stuff that's like totally not related, you know. And I look at patterns that are playing out that are preventing women and men from stepping in with full authenticity when it comes to sex and sensuality. And it's not to do with, it's not directly to do with sex at all. It's really
Mm-hmm.
to do with patterns that are initiating some kind of contract, right? It's like a contraction within. I'm also really in that contract, the word contract being contraction, but that's a whole
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yeah,
It's this contraction. And I think whenever there's a contraction, which is a form of fear, then we're going against love, which is expansion.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it really depends on the personal conditioning and the patterns that different people are playing out. And the amazing thing with emotional clearing is how quickly and how specifically we can target those patterns and release them.
Yes. And I mean, it's really interesting that you talk about patterns, and you know, I do a lot of sexual work, tantra, and some of them it is related to, you know, the mother and father side. And you know, that's why dominatrix, you know, play the fantasy role of, you know, dressing guys like little girls, or you know, tons of taboo stuff. And I believe you shared an article about how guys have this urgency of like, when am I going to have sex? When am I going to have sex? Like, when are we going to get there? I don't know if you remember the article. And it's related to the lack of touch that male children receive. I'm not sure of your experience with your partner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I think that there's yeah, like you said, it's to do with what's been conditioned. It's to do with the experiences that people have gone through, and the way that they anchor. And what you're talking about in terms of a lack of touch is a really significant thing, and a really significant topic for a lot of men, I find, and is what is contributing to a whole lot of crazy nonsense in the world. That for me is the real root cause of a lot of men's stuff, I feel. And then on the flip side, you know, women are so often striving to be in these male roles because so many of the associations that we forged around particular words and particular concepts like success are very external and very male driven. You know, the workplace has been a man's place. It was built by men, you know, within a structure that served something that was, you know, very different to what we have today. And now we're criticizing an old model for not catering to something that it was never asked to cater to before. So a lot of women are trying to morph themselves and step into these roles which don't quite suit them a lot of the time, and I think that's where the pelvic bowl activation stuff
Yes, good. I was about to ask you, where does the pelvic bowl activation come in? I'm like, is there like a bowl? Hey, Yana, you just bring this bowl and you're like, okay, sit in this bowl.
No, the pelvic bowl is the hips region, it's the ovarian energy, it's the womb energy, it's the cervix and the vagina and the clitoris. It's the entirety of what sits as our power structure and our power system. And there's the physical anatomy, there's also the energetic anatomy of women's power and women's bodies. And so what I do is I use emotional clearing to release the trauma that sits in the pelvic bowl for women. The first session addresses the ovarian energy, the creative energy, the potential energy. And then we come to the womb, which is the womb walls and the womb space. And those are different energies as well to connect to. And then we come to the different quadrants of the vagina, cervix, and then finally the clitoris. And so over 3 sessions, we really activate this energy. We release the trauma that sits in these spaces, and we really come into our power. The way that I understand it is that trauma is an experience that has been stored, right? It's like we've hit overwhelm, we've received too much experience, too much emotion in one go. We're unable to digest it all. We've ingested it. And so our energy comes in and it holds it in place. And so we have a lot of stagnated energy and stagnated emotion. It's kind of a simultaneous situation. I found that when I was sort of stepping into reading a lot about women's work, I was dropping into my body and I was trying to drop in, and I couldn't feel anything. And I felt like there was something integrally wrong with me. And it was only after doing a certain amount of emotional clearing that I realized that my year of trying to drop in and feeling nothing was a result of just so much trauma, so much stagnation in my body, that the energy wasn't moving, it wasn't active, so I couldn't connect to it. I couldn't harness it, I couldn't work with it, because it was here, it was holding the trauma in place. So what I do is I release the trauma from the pelvic bowl so that this energy can activate, so that women can connect with it and work with it and feel it and actually get what it's about. Otherwise, we're just regurgitating words. We're just so
the word
experiencing what our bodies have to offer.
And that's interesting that you brought up words a lot. Like you in our conversation, you brought up like there's certain words like success that really like shift a woman's like biochemistry with themselves, right? Like in my reality was like you need to trabajar, which means work. And I noticed like sometimes like when I was going through that, like I felt tense and got stressed and got a little bit sick. And then there's some women who want to get pregnant and then they can't because they're like, I need to make it. Like the CEOs, the boss bitches, right? That are like, oh, I just need to, I have to be successful. If I can get pregnant, then I win. And so I don't know if you've had experiences with clients that like were so in their masculine that it affected their womb space. Does that make sense?
Definitely. There's what I find is very common is just disconnect through shame, but also disconnect through what I call a stress distractor system. So when we're not engaging in this level of our embodiment that has to do with release and the feeling and the releasing of emotions, we come up into our headspace, and our headspace is where we get stressed, and our headspace is also where we distract. And so there's a lot of people that are in this space which is of non-engagement, of being stressed, and then just distracting themselves. Facebook, phones, emails, messages, work, whatever it is, and it's stress and it's distract, and it's stress and it's distract, and it's stress and it's distract, and they're never taking a moment to drop in. There's another level of it where women are dropping into their hearts a lot, and they're not actually dropping deeper to connect with their bodies deeper down, with their, with their yoni, with their system and their power and their energy, which is really where the power of a woman's body lies. It's where feminine power sits in my opinion, from my perspective. Yenizo and I see how traditionally, we're both dancers, traditionally across cultures, anywhere you go in the world, traditional dance, the women dance in their hips and the men dance in their chests. It's like that for me is, that just speaks. It just speaks. It's like the activation of energy in that part of your body, you know, because that's where the energy speaks from. And I feel like once women connect to that space in their bodies, a lot happens. A lot.
Yes. And you're a dancer, and you've experienced. I mean, coming from a dance background myself, some dancers have so much pressure, right, to have a certain point, to look a certain way, to even move their hips. And I feel like dancers would benefit from like going deeper in their bodies more by breath work or doing inner work. But most of the dancers I've witnessed are like, oh, I just have to get technique. I need to be technique, which is kind of like similar to the bedroom. I want to like be good at this. I want to be good in bed.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's just my personal theory.
With my so my show in Johannesburg, I had 6 dancers, and I was doing a lot of, Yenizo and I, we were facilitating the process together, and we were doing a lot of intention setting and breath work and just introducing them to the notion of energy. Like it was something that they hadn't really been introduced to before, and we were doing, a bit of qigong and things like that, and it was super powerful for us to see the transformation in those dancers throughout that time working together. And when we asked for their feedback, it was like, wow, you've introduced me to a whole new concept and a whole new perspective on performance that after 3 years of studying performance, I haven't known. I'll take this with me forever. It's super, super, super powerful. My mission, my ultimate life goal is the fusion of dance with emotional clearing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm like, how would you do that? Like you have to.
So, right now I'm able to sit here, and with your permission, I can shift things in your deep psyche. Like I can shift things for you in your body through surrogacy. So it's client and it's practitioner, and that's the relationship. I wish to be the practitioner on stage with dancers who I have trained as my dance company, who are facilitating emotional clearing to an audience who are watching the performance, who are watching the show. So performance meets practitioner life, and it's just reshifting the perspective of, how we're to use performance and how we can use performance, and use it
absolutely
together in a way that I'm unaware of anyone doing that right now.
Well, you're the first one I've met that has done that. I'm also like outside distracted by the flies. You should do emotional clearing on animals. So you kept mentioning Nyaniso, and it seems like you have such a strong like bond with him. And what are some intimacy, your takeaways for couples that maybe are in disagreement, that they don't know how to connect, especially because there we go, I gotta call it. Does that make sense? What are some things you can tell couples that maybe they're having a difficult time?
My mantra, my personal mantra, is it starts with self, it starts at home. So it starts with self as the first part of that. And I can't tell you how often in the past, before I came into the philosophies and the understandings that this work that I now hold carries, I can't tell you the amount of times that I would point the finger and I would blame and I would expect Nyaniso to develop coping mechanisms for me. Like so often, and it's so common, and it still slips in today. The most powerful thing that you can do is to realize that it is all what you are calling in, and it is all for you, and it is all a reflection. It's all a mirror. Like, it's all a reflection. Right now, your partner, whatever is going on, is reflecting yourself back to you. When Yana and I have been through very, 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 very rocky times, I would write, and I would write, Yana is XYZ, and I can't da 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 da. And I would write and write and write, uncensored. I would write and I would write and I would write. And then I would cross out his name, and I would write Yana. I'd read it back.
Wow, that's amazing.
You know, and it would be like, Yenso doesn't give a shit about me, and he doesn't respect my boundaries. And then it would be like, Yana doesn't give a shit about me and doesn't respect my boundaries. Okay. Well, that's something for me to address, because there's definitely truth in that. And the moment that I shifted that up for myself internally, what I perceived of my partner changed, and what I received of my partner therefore changed as well. So
that's why you mean go start with yourself, and then you end up with home, correct?
Yeah. I mean, it starts with home is the second part of that, which is when it comes to the outside world. You know, it's like, don't put the outside world before your home. You know, you can go out there and put on a happy face and imagine that you're fine and all these things, but ultimately the place you're returning to is home. And if home isn't okay, then you need to address that. So home is where it begins. Like, if your home isn't okay, that is going to permeate into all your other areas of life. You can't just walk out the door and think that it's not. So it starts with self, it starts with myself, and then it starts with home. And home a lot of the time translates to my relationship. You know, my partner who will be sleeping next to me tonight. You know, that's the level of discussion that I have with myself. So the first place for me to check into is myself. The second place for me to check into is my home. And then I can go into the outside world and engage.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And, you know, really come with integrity. Because I can't be giving advice, and I can't be telling people how to, you know, better their own lives if I'm not taking care of my own.
That's right. Like, absolutely.
How?
It's asking advice from a poor person, right? Yeah. Or asking like sex advice from someone who's never had sex.
Yeah.
And you talked about home, and I mean, just to share that I really got into feng shui. So it's really interesting how, you know, like your environment really shapes your reality. Like if you are messy and you're not, you know, cleaning up after yourself, it's going to reflect on your outside world, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like that rule that I've seen so many videos and stuff lately that's like, number one piece of advice, make your bed, tidy up your room. Like, how can you give advice anywhere else if you're not taking care of where you're really at? And I think that it's literal, but it's also a metaphor, you know? And there's so much to be explored in that.
Yeah. And your home is also your body, you know, or your body is your temple. And that's why women need to create like a system for their bodies, like, you know, either take on your pelvic bowl activation, yoni work, pleasure work. I mean, I do my own, you know, tapping work. Because some of the women I've talked to, they said, oh, I can't, I'm waiting for a guy to please me. Or the other spectrum is, if I have an orgasm, it's wrong because of religion, right? And so that's where the emotional clearing would probably help those people.
Definitely. So much. It's so fascinating to see how thought patterns play out and how they're indoctrinated and how they get coded into our subconscious, which then just feeds back to our reality. You know, so we have a lot of people that are like, well, I know that technically I shouldn't feel this way, and I know that I just read that thing that logically makes sense, but the way I feel just doesn't, like, can't help but feel shame or feel embarrassed or feel guilty. Like I can't help it. And it's true. You know, it's very difficult to address the subconscious mind from the conscious mind, because the subconscious mind informs the conscious mind. It doesn't really work the other way around. I mean, it can do, but the time it takes to shift a habit, you know, is so much longer. And what it takes to really reprogram what's going on subconsciously is something that takes a lot longer than emotional clearing allows for. So emotional clearing allows us to tap straight in and shift it. Like, shift it. What's the emotion? Let's shift it out. Now, in my relationship, there's no excuse to be feeling a way that we don't want to be feeling. If it's like, I hate that you made me feel that way. Well, he didn't make me feel that way. I made myself feel that way. And I'm choosing to feel that way right now because I have tools in my hands that allow for me to change it. Literally, legitimately change it. Do I want to be feeling that way? If I'm wallowing, then I need to address that I'm choosing to wallow. And I think that applies to, I mean, it's really difficult for people who don't have these tools. If you don't have these tools and this is resonating or if this is triggering you in any way, there are videos online. Check out Dane and Clear Your Shit. And yeah, Google it. You'll find it. Dane Thomas, Clear Your Shit. He's written a book about the methods. He's recorded videos that you can use to really, really tap into this. I know that for a lot of people, when I speak this way, it's coming from the privilege of having these tools. And, you know, I remember life when I didn't have these tools and I didn't know how I could possibly deal with life or deal with all of the shit inside of my system.
And who was Yana before these tools?
I was a mess. I was struggling. I was really, really struggling. I'd bottled so much up throughout my life. You know, I was raped when I was 13. My dad died when I was 14. I was in bad relationships. I just had shit relationships with boys and then men, like, for the rest of my life. And then I was projecting all of that onto Nyaniso in our relationship. And, like, I was a mess. Yeah. And I didn't know how much journaling or whatever it was going to take to shift that. I really didn't know. I had no idea. And I felt helpless because of it. It's like the shadow was so real, and the shadow normalizes itself in your system so deeply when you're in that place. It just feels like, yeah, you know, chilled to have these visions and, you know, like to really be quite abusive internally in my own mind. Like that.
Oh, yeah. Women are absolutely. And you said something powerful that, you know, women tend to victimize and bully themselves more, right? I think I heard that women have twice the limbic system, which is responsible for those memories, those flashbacks, that imagination. And if you are, you know, too much in your mind, it's going to affect your orgasm, like your expression in the bedroom, even vocally. Some women don't express themselves, right? Like we hear Madonna, express yourself. And I always, like, I actually used to shame other girls if I heard them moaning. I'm like, like she sounds like a slut, and like I would slut shame them. And then I'm like, oh, if I'm quieter, then I'm like more powerful. Which, no, you're actually like, vulnerability is even just, you know, expressing yourself vocally in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And if you're shutting down, you know, perhaps you are holding on to something, a memory that's coming up. And it sounds that you have some powerful tools with the pelvic floor, pelvic bowl activation. And, you know, really quick, like what has people said about this technology?
It's amazing. Like it's been amazing, and it's my thing. And the deeper I go into it, the more it blows my mind. Like the spiral and the pelvic bowl activation are the two main things that I currently facilitate. And the spiral is incredible for kind of overall full activation. It's there's nothing like it. There's nothing like spiral. Pelvic bowl activations, they're my thing. Like I pieced this together. And
oh, so you created it.
I pieced together the pelvic bowl
wow.
just from so much reading and so much delving and it just makes so much sense to me. And I feel like because I pieced it together, it just sits in my body. You know, it's come from me. And so it's not a logical thing that has been transmitted to me that I have learned to then facilitate. It's an amalgamation of what I've drawn into my system and experimenting and playing with what makes sense. So when I facilitate this work, it's really like embedded in me. And so what I'm able to shift for women is huge, and it's like deeper orgasms and enjoying menstruation and not having pain anymore during menstruation, and
nice.
like feeling connected to intuition and being able to rely on intuition, and you know, connecting to dreams and connecting to visions and feeling more connected to other women, and an integration of their own inner masculine and inner feminine, and the list goes on. It's really, it's still early days, so the long-term effects is something that I'm unable to assess right now, but the feedback that I've had from the women that I've worked with is just, it's so beautiful. It just keeps breathing life into itself, and that is a sign of a real baby. You know, like you give birth to this thing, and then other people speak back to it and have conversations with it, and you're like, okay, cool. This is something. This is real.
Yeah, absolutely. And how can people find you? I'm just also wrapping up because there's actually now bees near my food. Just to keep it real. Hey, we're humans, you know. Part of, you know, being vulnerable is like, hey, you know, sharing our truth. Like sometimes, like, I remember going to a seminar and I'm like, I need to be more serious. I need to sit up more. And now I'm like, okay, like, I'm in danger right now from these bees. So Yana, how can people find you right now, like, so they can hear about your courses, like, or, you know, hear about your latest projects?
You can find my website, velasouls.com, VELASOULS.com. Vela means to appear in my partner's language. So it's a calling for souls to appear. That's the so velasouls.com. You can find us, Vela Souls, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. I write really long captions. I write a lot, so enjoy reading if you wish to. And there's lots of videos and lots of resources. I'm currently in the process of building Vela Mama, which is a forum to support the pelvic bowl activation work. So when women opt into the pelvic bowl activation, they can also log on to a closed section of the website, which allows for them to delve into extra resources that I create to support the sessions. So that's something that women are buying into, and that's really
so exciting.
And
on other social media like Instagram or YouTube?
Instagram, YouTube, we've got a YouTube. I need to upload more to there. Instagram, Facebook, you can find me as Yana Seidl on Facebook as well. If you want to connect with me personally, just send a friend request.
Yes.
And yay, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much me. My website, my Facebook, my Insta, my Twitter. Kind of need to get active again after a busy summer.
Well, thank you, Yana. And for those, I'm just really, really happy to connect with Yana again. She's one of my favorite people to work with. Every time I see her Facebook post, it's just absolutely amazing. So check her out. So thank you, Yana. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.